Today you get to meet an amazing man who traveled all the way from Russia to right here in Barrie. He has some amazing stories. Let's get to know Arkady Spivak. So we're sitting here in the beautiful Maddie in downtown Barrie. I've got the honor of sitting and talking to Arkady. Arkady, thank you for being my guest today. It's so nice to see you again.
Thank you for having me in my own on my own set.
I know,
but not my own set, but
it's so cool because we walk in here and it's like, oh, what are we going to see today? Because unless you look at the calendar, do we know what show's going on? It could have been Romeo and Juliet. I could have been talking to you up on a balcony. It would have been quite the interview, right?
It would be. Who would be on the balcony? That's the
okay. Yeah, I guess.
Which
maybe
one of us?
Okay, put me up.
Let's just get out of that. Let's go somewhere else. Right?
For sure. So this place is fantastic, and I'm gonna. It's the most terrible confession for you. I've done all kinds of stuff. Like we met and did a creative thing for Pie Magazine in the front lobby, and we did some cool creative with you. But I've never sat in here and actually seen a show. So I apologize, but I am so changing that. That is now on my new 2017 to do.
I'll accept your commitment.
Good.
I'll accept your
appreciate
commitment.
that.
And by the way, thank you so much for. I loved meeting you for Pie Magazine because. My value since that photo shoot had gone up. I had headshots that I'm actually proud of that I didn't think were important to have until we shot those. So thank you.
Well, great to Sandra Roberts for getting you into that magazine. And I tell you, we had a great time. That was a fun day. Scott Cooper did some great photography for you, and you know, coming up with the idea to have you coming through the doors. I love how much promotion you've gotten from that.
I had to suffer for my art that afternoon, but
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I had to squeeze and contain all of the body parts that should be lesser.
It was fun.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's going on here right now? What set are we sitting on? Let's just kind of get to that real quick.
Yeah, we are on the set of a musical called Offline. It's a world premiere production which is running this week. And the uniqueness about it is that it was collectively created. So we put together a team of very talented, versatile artists, theater makers really, rather than actors who created the work from scratch together. So there wasn't a short story to adapt it from, there wasn't a novel, there wasn't anything. There wasn't even a score that you sometimes can do like a jukebox musical where you write a story to an existing popular music. So this is an originally created musical, wonderful story, wonderful method of creation. It has inventiveness such as the score is actually electronic score. It's written on synthesizer. It's not
interesting.
It's not something that is played electronically, but sort of pretends to be acoustic work.
And no big orchestra here to do it either.
Not big orchestra. It's not. We weren't doing it just not to have an orchestra. We were doing it because to try to bring a new sound into a musical. You know.
Sure. So now who chooses what things we're going to see here at the Maddie? Like who goes through that? You do that yourself?
I do, yeah. I have this unique position, and that is I don't actually work within the projects myself. You know, I don't act, I don't direct, I don't write. What I do, I'm sort of a curator, you know, which is more and more becoming an art form. And what that means is I'm the one who comes up with a playbill, which is really in reference and connection to the actual people who I respect and support and would like to see flourish and evolve through a project that we do. And a lot of our audiences know that what we do is never outside of the mainstream. It's not something where you need a PhD or to understand. You know, if they think that this is experimental, they haven't seen experimental.
Yeah.
You know, but it's as far to the left as you can without losing gravity as
There's a difference between being creative and then being like, what was that?
True. Yeah. And sometimes, we never set out to produce a flop. Sometimes it's brilliant. Sometimes it needs work. But it's honest. It's honest. It's people.
Well, that's the integrity of it, right?
Yeah. It always has integrity. It wasn't like, oh, this person didn't know what they were doing, or wasn't into it, or.
Well, I always hear incredible things about the Maddie, right?
Yeah.
I guess my life is just I've always been too busy, but I'm going to change all that to get down here.
Yeah.
How does the Maddie make itself different than other theaters, and what makes it so unique? Because it truly sounds like what you're doing here is very revolutionary and very unique.
Yeah, well, the Meidi is the building where we work out of. It's owned and managed by the city of Barrie, who also build it for groups such as ourselves and various others like Theatre by the Bay and community groups and non-theatre things like dance companies and private usage. We rent it like every other tenant on a priority basis. Our season goes in first just because it takes most of, we take a lot of days at a given time and I need longer time to plan. But what's unique about the space itself is that it's the one of the very few, 1 or 2 or 3 in the last 5 to 10 years, black box theaters.
Okay.
And by black box, it's usually black. Just because that's a good base color
Original.
in a theater, but also that it's completely configurable. You can have any kind of configuration. You're not stuck with a certain, like a sitting plan and a proscenium, like the arch.
Yeah, for sure.
Arc stage type of thing. So that this allows us first, and it's intimate. We use it in 100 seats. It could go to 200 seats if all the seats are out, but that would leave no room for stage in the set.
Yeah.
So it's very, very flexible. It completely liberates us to do pretty much any work from major musicals, and we do big musicals like 12 people to a 100-seat audience. That's a very unusual, unique, and specific thing that happens.
And that's fun because I've seen theater in Toronto, everywhere from the Poor Alex all the way to the Hummingbird, and some of those smaller theaters where you go in, there's only 50 people watching or 100 people watching, and there's something going on.
Yeah.
It is intimate, and it does give it something kind of personal, like you're a little closer to everything, right?
Absolutely. And it allows us to do more experimental work than you couldn't necessarily get away with in a 300-seat theater or more, of course, which means that the kind of work that gets presented here, it's no longer the question about what kind of theater somebody in Barrie is getting. It's what kind of theater somebody in Barrie is getting that other people are not.
Yep.
Right? And so that allows us to use exceptional talent coming in from the off season at Shaw, Stratford festivals, or between the seasons usually means November to February. We get all these wonderful people working on interesting things to them and to ourselves that they wouldn't consider otherwise if we were doing a bigger venue, whatever. There is no novelty of experience for the audiences or for the artists.
Sure. And those bigger venues, sometimes I think you lose a sense of a community too, right? You've got a big sense of community. You've got Cravings doing catering. You've got, again, we mentioned Pie earlier. You've got some fantastic locals.
Yeah.
But you do tend to have a theater here that embraces the city of Barrie, right?
Oh, totally. Totally. People say, well, is Barrie ready for this? Is Barrie ready for that?
It's ready.
I'm thinking, when will I get a telegram? Well, why did I never mention telegram? Who even knows what it is anymore? When will I get an email? And it was expensive. I remember, I was touring at 11 years of age in Russia with a theater company I was involved in, whatever.
And you got a telegraph?
No, I ran out of money completely. And I had to send a telegram. This was late 80s, to my mother. I only had time. I only had money for one word, and I said, 50 rublify. I just created a word. They wouldn't accept it because it's not a dictionary word.
Oh.
But I sort of...
You'd be great at Scrabble.
Yeah. Well, I had to be. And I got 75 rubles, I remember, because I was inventive about how I asked for 50. And that I remember that. But anyway, what was I? Telegram.
Telegraph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like
When's
I would
Barrie
get an
gonna be
email saying, Barrie's ready for it, you can go
Yeah.
ahead. Nobody's ready for anything. Anyway, like nobody's ever ready for anything.
No, I don't think Barrie is ever ready for anything, and it tends to like its surprises. And I think those surprises make Barrie one of the great things that it is, because it is willing to accept surprise.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
So let's go back here to your rublio money that you're creating here.
Rublifying.
So you're obviously not from Barrie. Okay,
No.
we've had this discussion. How long ago did you come to Barrie, and how long ago did you come from? You were in Soviet Russia.
Soviet Russia, Soviet Union, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not the Russia we know it as today. That's sort of a different Russia. Back then, most people like me that grew up in the the 70s and 80s,
Yeah.
we think of that whole Frankie Goes to Hollywood, two tribes go to war. It was
Yeah.
the old Ronald Reagan Gorbachev fight.
Yeah.
But nobody really sees Russia for a lot of the beauty, the architecture. The greatest ballet in the world is in Russia, right? So what brought you here?
Well, what brought me here is more or less the same as 300,000 other people who arrived in late 80s, early 90s, as well as there was some other wave in the 70s. And people have been moving here ever since, which now is mostly a sort of just, it wasn't like politically driven. It's more relocation of life, how you move and live. It wasn't like immigration,
So you were how old when you came here then? To
I
Canada?
was 15. I turned 15 almost as we arrived, and this was in 1990. So I've been in Canada for 26 and a half. Oh my God, 26 and a half years.
Yeah.
And I've been in Barrie for 16 of them. So since 2000.
Okay.
You know.
And so where did you arrive, and what was your passion when you first arrived
Well,
in Canada?
I was a kid, and I was brought by my mother because my father, who passed away when I was young, thank you, his relatives, his mother, his grandfather, my grandparents, my uncle, my aunt, a bunch of other relatives were all already here from late 70s. They sort of immigrated as the first wave of immigrants during Brezhnev, when it was totally frowned upon. You were betraying the homeland, you were stripped of status, you were fired from work.
Yeah.
We sort of followed after Perestroika in late 80s, where that was still kind of a feeling more than you were living a very close state. And I certainly at that point incorrectly thought I will never see any of those people again, just because it was kind of going into a different universe. It wasn't just, and the next thing I know, they're all here. Or they're in Israel, and I'm like, what was I so tragic about? I just lost a lot of...
You thought you'd lost everybody?
I lost everyone.
And they're coming back.
And it was very traumatic. And of course, I was a theater kid because all of my relatives, my mother was a musical director in a theater in Moscow.
So tell me about that. So
Yes, was a
your
musical director
inspiration...
here.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
The inspiration is very simple. You show up backstage once, and you see how, of course, in Soviet Russia, what happened backstage is totally disallowed anywhere else in the world, including Canada. The actors are drunk, smoking, drinking, and here I am, I remember, I don't think I should tell you, my mom's closest friend, she's a tremendous actress, who unfortunately had a drinking problem, a huge drinking problem, which she's not the only one. That she was the epitome for what Russian actors had to go through. And she was playing a princess. It was a fairy tale. It was a kids' matinee, which they would do, like, adult normal shows at night. It was a rep system, so that there was the same group of actors employed by theater on an ongoing basis, performing in rotation at the same time, like 15 to 25 different shows, including some kid ones for families.
Okay.
And so I, of course, came. It was a Princess Frog. It was called Russian Folktale.
Yeah.
And this particular actress was playing a confidant of a princess who was turned into a frog by a witch and all those people. And so she was turned into a bear, a female bear, who was a servant. So she appeared in the second act, which was great because when she showed up for work, they had enough drunk. They had enough time to call in, and the second person who was performing, there were two actors alternating. So that's great. And when
so drunk bear on a kids' matinee.
That's right.
Fantastic.
Well, and that was right after Christmas, New Year's. It was that Christmas break. Well, it was New Year's break, but it's the same idea as a Christmas break. And you can imagine that the celebrations were going, and people had to do two kids' matinees. How much they hated their life and whatever. And So I go backstage. There is this scene. The bear whom I know as my aunt. My aunt figure is totally out of, not in a condition.
Yeah.
The stage manager is ripping the skin costume, the bear skin, off her body.
Yeah.
They're cursing at each other, calling each other names I wouldn't believe. Meanwhile, the alternate bear princess is already standing to receive the skin because it's intermission. It's time to do second act. Yeah. And I showed up backstage, not knowing, because my mother said, well, at intermission, you just go over here. I was totally unmonitored.
So you're a little kid watching this.
So here I was, a full adult. I get to open doors for the first time with permission, that somewhere where I've never been. I see this.
Yeah. And you're hooked.
And I'm hooked. And I'm hooked. And then after the show, the discontinued bear was sitting in her dressing room, like in full sorrow, knowing that she's probably going to get fired, which she didn't. She got fired eventually.
Yeah.
With a bear head to her side. So it has a bear's head, the skin.
Oh, what a picture.
And I'm like, this makes no sense on any level.
No, it's so funny.
But somehow it all works.
And you got a spark.
And I got a spark. And then of course, I saw the whole show, and I thought, well, the show is real. It was kind of good, you know, certainly from whatever I was perspective. But what's happening backstage? Oh, it's just probably an unfortunate accident, something, you know,
Sure.
I'm not going to dwell on it. It's interesting, you know, and I sort of forgave it right at the beginning.
Interesting.
You know?
Yeah. It's that whole abstract of what
Yeah.
you see that's your perception as a child of all things, when your mind's going to be the most sponge, right?
Yeah.
You're going to soak it in. Even if it doesn't make sense, it's terrific, right? It's like that Mark Twain quote, "The suspense is killing me. I hope it continues," right? It's so true. So now you get this spark. You're inspired by this
But you can
wonderful
imagine,
family.
this is not a normal way one develops an audience.
Well, you would hope not.
Yeah.
You would hope not.
Although on the other hand, maybe it should be. You know, we'll have more audiences.
Maybe it's a little
you know,
spark.
You know, I don't know.
Yeah. So then you're here. How do you get into the Maddie or into theater? What was your first job in theater when you came to Canada? What did you do?
McDonald's.
They say it's a bit of a theater production depending on what you're doing.
No, it's the greatest possible. It's
Great reputation for
great
launching.
reputation, and people sort of laugh at me when I. But you know, it's for a young kid. Well, first
You're
of all,
a teen.
I didn't speak the language at all. So I started from here I was a theater kid backstage, to having to sweep parking lots in January in Toronto, which is where it was a traumatic sort of, but not. And you kind of start thinking that this is what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life in this country. You know, it was kind of, and I suspect this is what child stars do or whatever. You know,
They got to start somewhere.
yeah, but then you start somewhere, then you go into, cleaning parking lots. And then I sort of taught myself all the way to management position. Then I left. Then I went to York University, and I was going into languages first because I felt you separated yourself from the theater, the system, the creation system, the theater industry, the connections, everything else were totally severe to that point.
Yeah.
And then I started my first. I didn't do it at high school for some reason. I don't know why. I didn't participate in any kind of in any way. But then, I don't know why.
Depending on where you go to school, I think that sometimes that whole creative aspect of things too can get smothered.
Yeah. We had a
school.
great teacher. We had
Yeah.
a great drama teacher, a very talented woman who did annual musicals, and a lot of major people that are now, one in particular, Mike Najewski, was co-founder of the theater. He now works at Stratford. We
Oh,
were in the
wow.
same high school. We never met, but I remember seeing him
Interesting.
as 15-year-old. I'm like, who is this young person playing MC in Cabaret at 15? Which is way, but the idea is that it took me a while to rediscover it in university, and then I was going into languages. I thought I was going to teach French. I don't know why I thought that. And then I took my first drama class at university, and then I went sideways there. I kind of rediscovered it immediately.
Interesting. Like in our high school, we had this incredible, passionate man named Mr. Conroy who, without him, I don't think the school that I went to would have had any of its creative element without him. I think that there's certain creative teachers and stuff, but this guy was one of those spark makers, right? Like he looked for the spark in everybody. He wanted to just kind of scratch. He'd almost want to annoy you sometimes in a way to get you to just come out of your box. Because if you're not out of your comfort zone, I don't think you're authentic. You have to be out of your comfort zone to ever be truly authentic, I think. And I think that's one of the things I think people enjoy about you is you're very authentic. You know, you're Arkady, this incredibly creative, fun guy with his incredible history. And I want to kind of go back and unpack that a little bit more too. So you come here, you've got this guy, this friend of yours who's gone to Stratford. Have you ever worked in Stratford yourself, or where was your first real theater gig?
No, my first theater. I worked at the Griffin Theater. I got a summer job.
Georgian College.
Now defunct Barrie-based theater. I got a summer job, and then I stayed I remember I was going back to university for the last year, But the York was going on strike at that time, and so I figured, well, somebody's offering me a job and a position in a profession that I'm going to school for, so I'm going to be paying $6,000 to $10,000 not to go to school because they're on a strike, where I might be getting paid to go through. You know what I mean? It made no sense to me, so I actually never went back. I sort of stayed in Barrie. I thought I was going to go and finish off the courses by correspondence, but I haven't had time since. It's been so many years. So I stayed here. This was sort of my first professional experience.
Okay.
I sort of did a lot of indie productions, and then halfway through, it was always known that I would be in Barrie for 2 years just for my apprenticeship, you know, because at that point, Griffin and its general manager at the time, Barbayoki, were like giving me pretty much anything, like support, but also I want to try this. Sure, go ahead.
So you got carte blanche to do some of the things you just really want to do.
Well, I wouldn't call it carte blanche. There was still a very difficult reality to work under, and that is never enough funding. And Griffin at that point, the shows were all imported. They were not creating anything, which is what would be important for me, and that is having a direct impact on a creative life that I believe in. You know. So it wasn't kind of available to me, and that's what I figured would be a limited time that I would spend. And then I started Talkers Free Theatre with my colleagues in Toronto first.
So where did that come from, the whole Talkers Free? What was part of the conception of the name and the conception of making it all happen?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah, I just wanted to work with talented people, right? I'm thinking, oh my God, this person is not. It's just the idea of, and it evolved so much since the beginning. I'm first mandate. I look at it now. I'm like, ugh. It's a 2-second concern, you know.
Yeah.
And then it evolved. And what's unusual in my case is that, unlike all of my peers who are running theaters, they would have gone through, you know, I'm an actor, then I'm a director, then I'm running a theater. Or I am a stage manager, then a production manager, then a general manager. What I do is kind of combination of both. I'm responsible administratively and artistically for the work, sort of. It's a combined hybrid position. Well, you know, I started a theater as my first independent professional job. And it took me a while, and I'm still learning, to actually figure out what are the departments actually doing. You know, what is it like to be a set designer? What is it like to be anyone? You know, but now I know more about what they do, so it's much more difficult for people to smuggle anything. You know, I now can catch them better. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, and again, I don't mean to say that I'm working with criminals or whatever, but
No, I know what you mean.
But you know, artistic vision is an artistic vision, and people will stop in front of nothing to achieve it.
Yeah.
You know, now I know, you know, that kind of stuff. You know.
So, what part of your job would you say is your love? What is the best part of your day? Is it the end of the night when everybody leaves, you know, applauding? Is it the applause? Is it just the people in here, the presence of the stage? Is it the actors? There must be something, though, that gives you maybe that little tear of happiness, the tear of joy. What is your joy?
The joy. So many things. So many things.
Sure.
Well, it's obvious joy is when someone does exceptional work, transformative work, that you know they've never done that kind of performance before, and they're excellent. The joy is to discover the next greatest talent. The joy is to give something that might not have worked in the past in its long production history, like a forgotten musical, an extra lease on life. All sorts of things that are specific to the art making itself, you know. To influence and give somebody an opportunity to do something that other people might not have had. But what's now, since this is the end of our 15th season, what started happening is...
Wow, it's been 15 seasons.
15th season, yeah.
Wow.
This is the last production. Somebody comes to me and said, you know, I was part of your youth mentorship program, and now I'm a professional in technical theater, and what you were doing 10 years ago had a profound effect on me. I didn't even know. But by the same
Awesome.
by the same logic, if I didn't know that I was making an impact on someone, how do I know that I turned somebody away from the theater, or that I didn't?
I'm
Yeah.
sure you're not.
Well, no, but you sort of you're just so concentrating on making sure that what the goals you articulated,
Yeah.
that you sort of have to move that very complicated machine towards that goal and make sure it's on time and on budget and people come and
Yeah.
all sorts of things. So the greatest joy is transforming people, right? Like I think we all have. An artist is not someone who gets paid to work on theater or ballet or whatever the thing is. It's a unique way. It's a sense of individuality.
Mm-hmm.
It's a unique way of doing things. You can be an artist when you're like a doctor because what you do is very specific to your individuality and good that way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's making people themselves really, and that's what differentiates theater from a sports event. Is a play is only good play when it speaks uniquely to you, which may be different than to whoever you came with.
That authentic self.
But you have to feel like as though it was created for you.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a sports event is all about a mass. It's people who are afraid of that sense of individuality, and I don't mean to criticize it, right?
No, but I get that.
They want
for
to
sure.
be a mass.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas theater is best for people in the audience who want to be that very original, unique, not like quirky or eccentric for the sake of it, but you know what I mean,
Yep.
who have a very unique position on the world, and theater has to respect and nurture that. So it almost has to feel, it's not like we're performing the show for general citizens of Bavaria. No, you play hockey for general, You have to speak to you and to you only as a play. And I think that that's a profound difference. And I think the reason why there isn't a lot of audiences, not a lot of audience, but you say, well, we want more audience, is because that sense of individuality, that unleashing of a creative process in the audience has never been encouraged enough.
Well, it can make people uncomfortable. Right?
Absolutely.
And so when they're uncomfortable, they like normal. They like that path. They don't want to get off of it. And that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So how do you get that spark into people? You're giving people the creative benefit that you're allowing people to be inspired, but you're also giving direction as well too that helps to get that.
I don't do enough of that as much as I probably should, simply because I think everyone, I'm there when somebody asks me an opinion, very rarely would I actually give direct notes, and only if I think something is in distress, which happens, which happens. But it's usually I give freedom. Like you do, you do your own vision. You do your own thing. You do, and as long as it doesn't libelize the theater from a legal or an audience or a financial standpoint.
Sure.
When I say you can do whatever you like, I don't mean you can order a piece of scenery that we'll be paying for that kind of stuff. But artistically, in terms of what you want to say, and I try to adjust what we do to the needs and to the interest of people that I feel excited about, because so it makes something. So it means, because if it's not going to mean anything to them, it's probably not going to mean anything to the audience.
Sure. Now, give me this one last closing message. What is your one quote that is always stuck in your head? There must be something from some theater, from some place, somewhere. There's got to be just a quote that's always inspired you. What is it?
That is a very talented Soviet actress once said that talent is like a zit. It appears on any place, at any time, without any notice, and you have to deal with it.
Excellent. Arkady, I think people need to get out and support the Maddie far more than I have in my past, and I apologize.
Yeah.
This is a fantastic spot. You are so truly interesting. This show could go on for hours. Thank
and
you for
it
being
will. We'll be sitting here for a day talking.
Thank you for being my guest today, Arkady.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi.